Greetings and salutations, East Africa, and welcome to your world this Wednesday morning. Now, this is a special day for those who are in the education sector, as a high-level summit dubbed the Global Partnership for Education Replenishment Summit is being held today in the United Kingdom. Now, a lot of hope is pegged on this funding, which will continue to enable our children access quality education in this country and beyond. Now, this morning I'm joined by some of the stakeholders who include children to discuss some of the barriers they face in the pursuit of quality education and how these can be overturned to enable this right for every child. My name is Gladys Gashanja, and this is what else you can expect. South African police raid township outside Johannesburg for looted goods.
Teachers on TSC employment have now been put under the TPAD system.
Kenya to co-host the 4th Global Partnership for Education Replenishment Summit with the UK government. So as we focus on education, what more needs to be done to harness quality education in this country? We find out.
A lot of good material that you can use, it's good ingredients.
And elsewhere, London hairdressers and barbers encourage salons to recycle their waste for energy. Thank you for joining us on this broadcast. We focus on matters education, and that's where the question of the day to you is: what more needs to be done to ensure all children access quality education? What more needs to be done to ensure all our children access a quality education? Well, remember, you can reach us using that hashtag new normal, and as always, you can also call in and be part of a conversation using the numbers at the bottom of your screen. But before we get to that pertinent conversation, let's take a look at the impact of COVID-19 around the world, and those statistics this morning stand at 195,991,320 confirmed cases globally. Out of that number, 177,678,249 have recovered, and unfortunately 4,193,155 deaths have been reported due to COVID-19. In the country, well, 198,935 is the number of those confirmed to have contracted COVID-19. Out of that number, 187,563 have recovered, and 3,882 deaths have been reported. Well, we take a look at some of the stories making headlines this morning. And South African police and soldiers raid rooms in the Nguni Hostel, a communal living compound in a township south of Johannesburg. Now, almost 2 weeks after widespread looting and unrest broke out in the country, officials are still retrieving pilfered goods. Now, the first direct commercial flight between Israel and Morocco lands in Marrakesh more than 7 months after the countries normalized diplomatic relations in a U.S. brokered deal. About 100 passengers from Tel Aviv arrived on an Israel flight Sunday to be met with dates, cakes, and mint tea at a welcoming ceremony organized in their honor. Now, this is a historic moment. This flight can only strengthen the bridge between Israel and Morocco. These are the words of Benjamin Ron, a tour guide hoping to bring in other Israelis in the future. Residents of the capital, Tunis, say that Tunisian President Kais Saied's decision to suspend parliament and dismiss his prime minister is a rescue operation and see that the time has come for change, but warn the people will rise up against him if he behaves like a dictator. Now, President Saied sacked the defense minister Monday, a day after ousting the prime minister and suspending parliament for 30 days, plunging the young democracy into constitutional crisis in the midst of a pandemic. Street clashes erupted Monday outside the army barricaded parliament as the biggest political party, Ennahda, decried the move as a coup. Still in the continent, and 14-year-old Precious is struggling to recover at the hospital after 21 days spent at the hands of heavily armed gunmen who kidnapped her from her school in northwest Nigeria.
How are you doing? Sorry, bro.
When I heard that she was being abducted, I thought maybe she will not be back. I lose hope. To pray, he had me to pray. If I pray, I'll stop the prayer for her. Even a group of people came to pray, I've been pursuing them, that they're just wasting their time. See, almost 2 weeks plus now. Where is the God that we are serving? She said when she was in the bush, they look at her. She's always thinking about her mother because she no get father. She cannot have mine. Then the kidnappers man asked her, did you have parents? They say my father is dead. It's only my mother. They keep her aside. Then they start selecting other people where they are orphan. They join them and the small one that they should come. Yesterday to walk is a problem. To talk is a problem. If she's happened to sit down, she's just fearing. She's remembering those guns that they used to shoot in that bush to fear them.
They are sleeping outside with this rainy season and everything, so they are exposed to mosquito bites and everything. All the things that can cause malaria and typhoid and whatever are there. So, but thank God we've done tests on them so far. None of them has cholera, but they have typhoid and they have malaria, and they are under treatment for those things.
Now to the focus of our conversation this morning. In June, Kenya began the fourth campaign for the Global Partnership for Education, which it's co-hosting with the UK government, and the campaign is aimed at raising money to fund education in GPE beneficiary countries between 2021 and 2025. Now, Kenya is considered to have made tremendous steps in achieving gender parity in the education sector.
The GPE supported the Commission in implementing TPAD in 4,000 primary schools. However, the Commission was able to scale up the program such that all the 336,671 teachers on TSC employment have now been put under the TPAD system.
Owing to the good partnership between Kenya and the GPE, our country is now among the pilot countries for GPE's financing arrangements for the period 2021 to 2025. Ladies and gentlemen, the new USD 53.3 million system transformative grant is expected to support the full implementation of our education reforms. We will also benefit from a further system capacity grant of $3.8 million and a multiplier grant of $40 million.
So the Global Partnership for Education Replenishment Summit is the focal point of our conversation today. And to help us along with this conversation, we are joined by various stakeholders in the education sector. As I mentioned, we are also including the children, as they are very critical in this conversation. And of course, in studio with me, we have Joseph Wasikongo, who is the National Coordinator at the Elimu Yetu Coalition. We are joined by the young ones. I'll start off with Georgina Ayuma, who is a youth advocate at the Plan International. Also joined by Whitney Blessings, who is a child advocate at the Busia County, and she also attends Pwani University. We are also joined by Esther Velma Achieng, who is also a child advocate and is joining us from Migori County. She is in Form 3 from Ogande Girls. And also joining us is the boy child amongst us, Carlton Hamadi, who is a child advocate at the SOS Children Village, particularly in Mombasa County, and he actually attends SOS Haman Maina Primary School. Thank you all for being part of this very vital conversation. And of course, Joseph, I'll start off with you. We need to understand what is quality education before we get to the nitty-gritties of the day.
In terms of quality education, I think it's that kind of education that a child can get and can be able to function well within the society. And we are talking about holistic development. We are talking about socially, morally, academically, and actually to be able to face the challenges that this particular child faces in the course of the day. So if we talk about quality education, it's not so much about, for example, just the academics. It goes beyond that. It's about moral development. It's about values. And it's also about having the relevant skills to be able to operate within market systems. That's quality education. Yes.
And today is a very momentous day for those in this industry. And of course, we're talking about the Global Partnership for Education. Who is behind it?
The Global Partnership for Education, the event itself, is about the replenishment of funding to the GPE. And GPE is essentially a partnership or a forum, a funding forum that actually looks for resources to fund education, and especially for countries that are in a state of want, to ensure that actually children get quality basic education. Now, this particular year's replenishment conference is the fourth one, and it is being co-hosted by our very own His Excellency, the President Uhuru Kenyatta, and the Prime Minister of Britain, Boris Johnson. And this day is momentous. And actually, it's beginning today and will be ending tomorrow. Now, the objective of the forum will be twofold, critically. Number one, President Kenyatta will be trying to find political commitment to have countries or nations actually invest 20% of their budgets to education. That is number one. And number two, the other objective will be about raising $5 billion to fund GPE over a period of 5 years. So it's really a momentous day today.
All right, and we'll delve further into how that money will actually be used and what use it goes into along the way. But let's bring in the children. I mean, these children are part and parcel of this conversation, very critical. But before I cross to them, why are they part of this conversation this morning?
Now, it's important that children be involved because the whole thing is about children. And if we are saying that we are talking about education and it's about children and we are not involving them, then it doesn't make sense. There is nothing about us if it doesn't involve us. And we should live with that particular principle. It is essential to have the voices of the children articulated. And that's the reason why alliances such as, I mean in the non-profit sector, whereby we have alliances such as the Joint Forces Alliance, like one spearheaded by World Vision and has membership of Plan, TD Homes, Child Fund, Save the Children, are critical because these players are ensuring that those voices of children are really coming out on critical matters of education.
And now let's hear from these children we speak from. And I'll start off with Whitney. What do you see as the barriers for you or the challenges that children face on the day-to-day in their pursuit to accessing education?
Okay, well, first, Kenya being a developing country, we have many barriers affecting education, which hinder children from going to school, such as, first of all, schools. Maybe, for instance, let's say, children, but it's either the desks are few or the classes are small. Comfortability is needed in education, and that hinders because it may affect some children whereby they are being squeezed while being taught in school. Second, it's poverty. Poverty is common in Kenya because we are still a developing country. Hence, some parents are unable to provide school fees for their children. This may lead to child labor and even child marriages. Child labor, a child is being forced to go and work in order to help his or her parents to provide for the need for the marriage. The parents may give out their daughter for marriage, for early marriage, so that they can have some money to take other children to school. I mean, why do they have to be sacrificed for the family needs? It really hurts a lot. We also have child defilement, let's say rape, whereby children are being raped either by their neighbor, scared, they live in fear because they don't know who to trust. We are seeing a lot of rape cases everywhere, and it really hurts a lot because it's innocent children who can't speak. They're afraid to speak the truth, especially when they're being defiled by their own relatives. We also have those children with disabilities. Some parents feel shy to take their disabled children to school, maybe because they feel they will be judged, but disability is not inability. All children are the same. They're supposed to be taken to school. Lastly, we have natural calamities. In some parts of Kenya, we have droughts, floods. These floods can wash their class. Tree. This is a challenge. We also have drought. It's too hot. There is no food, and a child can't go to school with hunger. Say that children are really facing a lot of challenges, and I hope the government will help to tackle those challenges. Thank you.
Very eloquently put across. Thank you, Whitney, for that. And before I cross over to the other children, I think, Joseph, it is so important to underscore some of the pointers that have been put out there, especially when it comes to child labor. As you know, ILO has declared 2021 as a year, that international year for the elimination of child labor. And Africa still has the highest numbers of children in child labor. How, as a country, are we ensuring that our children are in school and not helping out with their work?
When the contribution was made from the child, I mean, she talked about some of these economic factors within the family that make the children go out there and work for the sake of supporting the family. This is a negative reality of Africa. The children at this particular time, they need to have that particular education. I was really touched by that question, that why should we be sacrificed? Now, those kind of questions should actually prompt us as people within this particular, within the particular space of education, as leaders, to ask ourselves the question, what do we need to do to actually address those issues that at the end of the day make us compel children to go and labor for families? And if you come to it, it all settles down to leadership. We need leadership, effective leadership, so that at the end of the day we can have good economic systems that can be able to provide jobs for adults, so that adults can work and leave the children to go to school. So, but at the end of the day, it behoves all of us, because you can be in an environment whereby the situation doesn't compel a child to go to work, and yet you find a parent actually encouraging it. So there's also that particular aspect of awareness, creation of awareness within communities to actually ensure that our children focus on going to school. But we all need to come and talk about these things. This is the hard conversations that we need to talk. If it gets to a point that the child asks the question, why should I be sacrificed? That should hit us. And that should just tell us we need to come together and talk and see how we can address some of these issues so that our children, we can set them free to access education.
And still on some of the challenges that children are facing in the pursuit for quality education. Let me hear from the other children, starting off with Esther. Your colleague Whitney has talked about sexual, gender-based violence against children, especially during this pandemic. I think we've seen such a high rate of the same. How has this affected children where you're from, which is Migori County?
Here in Migori County, this has affected many children. Like many children has dropped out of school, some are not going to school, and the government is not even anything to support these children. Early marriages, some of the children are going for marriages very early so that they can provide their siblings to go to school. Yes, thank you.
Okay, and let me bring in the other person on this conversation, and this is Georgina. We've talked about, she's touched on early marriages, early pregnancies, but there's also the biggest factor in all this, which is female genital mutilation. Talk about how this is such a hindrance, especially for girls accessing education.
So, in our community, most girls, when they reach the age of around 11, 12, that is when they start becoming teenagers, many parents tend to take them through female genital mutilation for the reason of for them to get married at a young age. So young girls who get mutilated at young age, they end up being married and they don't go back to school. So this is such a huge problem in areas like, Tharaka Nithi, areas like in the northern part of Kenya. So many girls do not go back to school after their female genital mutilation. They end up being married at young age, and this affects them very much in their life.
And Joseph, I mean, this is one thing that has also popped out in 2019. The government, in conjunction with other partners, released this report about violence against children. And it was very telling, right from the home to the school and community at large. What more needs to be done to protect our children?
I think, one, we need to commit ourselves as citizens and even as the government to ensure that our schools are safe. And that's the issue. If schools are not safe, then you're going to witness violence. And what then does that mean for us? What it means then is that the schools are not secure. And if the schools are not secure, we do not have an environment that the child can access education. And we really need to address this particular issue, because it really saddens when you come to a point and you realize the children are violated even within the school settings. So how can we make these schools safe? And what that means is that if a child is violated within a school setting, I think it behoves our justice system to ensure that the culprits are actually brought to book so that it can act as a deterrent. The laws are there. And if we follow these particular laws, then we can make a contribution towards ensuring that our schools are safe. In any case, I think the government is a signatory to Safe School Declaration, and that gives it an obligation to ensure that these particular schools are safe. Now, the other thing that I would just want to comment on was the matter on FGM.
Yes.
And you realize that the impact is great. And actually, when schools were closed, courtesy of COVID, girls appear to be impacted more. And it's because of early pregnancies and matters related to FGM. And all these things, including even matters related to safety, we need concerted efforts. I think we need sober discussions with regards to these particular issues, because a school should be that place that the moment a child gets into the gate of the school, the child just feels safe. It should be that particular environment, so that at the end of the day, the child feels protected. And when protected in that particular environment, he or she can make the best use of a school, and which is about molding their future and even building character into them. But it all behoves us. It's all our responsibility. Because if a child is defiled and violated in school and the perpetrator goes free because of a lax system of the law, or maybe some agreements even within the communities, because we have had cases whereby a child has been violated and parents have actually gotten into some form of agreement or conversations with the perpetrator to have the matters ended. So these are some of the challenges that we have. And that calls for increased awareness over that particular issue. But the bottom line is our schools should be safe and our children should be protected.
Okay, so we take a short break here on Your World. When we come back, we hear from the children, from their perspective, what they think needs to be done to ensure that these setups are safe for them, and also what the stakeholders need to keep in mind when they are putting up these setups for the children to actually be part of. We'll be right back. Yeah, Mwambie Lete. I had to take a quick break. My computer is dying. I had not realized. Yes. The thing is, I wasn't coming through, and I don't know why I cannot reach you. Yeah. Inakuwa changing room kwa my African bag. Actually, nani anaweza kimbia? Benson ako wapi? Benson asha. Benso, inakufa. Utanikimbilia ile charger? Aye, but I need the charger. I don't know why, for some reason, sijui. Abi amende. Okay. For some reason, I cannot. Hey, inakata ni load. That's why I got a bit concerned. Alafu Jane, can we come back with some of the feedback? Thank you for staying with Your World. My name is Gladys Gashanja. Today is a special day for those in the education sector, even as we look to seeing the Global Partnership for Education Replenishment Summit held today in the United Kingdom. This is being co-hosted by both Kenya and the UK. And speaking of education stakeholders, in studio, we still have Joseph Wasikongo, who is the National Coordinator, Elimu Yetu Coalition, Georgina, who is a Youth Advocate Plan International, Whitney, Esther, Carlton Hamadi, who are all child advocates in their own rights from different counties, that is Busia, Migori, and Mombasa, respectively. Well, before we get to it, remember we had asked you on that question of the day, what more needs to be done to ensure all our children access quality education? What more needs to be done to ensure that all our children access quality education? And you are speaking to us on that hashtag new normal. Stephen Duarte says, compared to other countries, government cares about the future of their little ones, and so they give an environment for every child to access education, even to a point of giving rewards to those who perform well. Thank you for that note. We have Christine Mutena, who says, lack of inclusive education when it comes to quality education for children with disabilities. This ranges from infrastructure to curriculum. Special schools just bring up about segregation and ostracization from society, and we can surely do better. Thank you, Christine. Another here from Saka Rashford, who says CBC needs more attention and donor funding, otherwise it will become a white elephant. These are pertinent issues. Priscilla Jason says free lunch, especially for needy families, with poverty being underscored as one of the barriers. Yes, this is very important. And Cyrus Jenga here says it is all about the money. There can never be any magic any parent can play to give their children quality education, not unless he or she makes enough money and takes their their children to a quality school. We hear you, Cyrus, and thank you for writing in. That hashtag is new normal, and you can also reach us using the numbers at the bottom of your screen. Now, let's hear from the children in as far as some of those issues that have been brought up are concerned. And I'd like to hear from Carlton at this point, especially during this pandemic. A lot has come to the fore. Poverty is reigning supreme, and a lot of children, especially the girls, and I'm sure you have seen this in your partners when you go to school. Some girls don't even go to school just because they cannot afford their menstrual hygiene management. As a boy child and a child advocate, what would you see would be the best way out of this, with the governments helping out in the situation?
Thank you. The government should try to help the girl child in order to get their sanitary pads, and they should be educated. Yes.
Okay, and is this something that you see often, especially with your counterparts in school?
In my school, most girls are doing well, but from day to day when I go to school, there are some girls who do not usually go to school because you can see them, they are not wearing a good uniform. But if you go to their story, when you tell them why you're not going to school, they might say, because one day or one time, the menstruation happened at school and they didn't have the sanitary pads. That could not help them, and they fear the other people seeing them with that stuff on their skirts, and they fear going to school because the other children will laugh at them.
Yes, it's called menstrual shame, and this is quite a deterrent for a lot of the girls. Let's hear from Esther. What do you... I understand we lost Esther. Well, Georgina, how can we bridge the gap, especially for the girl child?
So for me, I think what the government can do is to keep on empowering the girl child, giving them the voice, giving them the platforms where they can air out their views, giving them the platforms where they can reach out, they can talk about what affects them, and they can come up with solutions. And also, just to add on what Carlton has said, the issue of sanitary towels, I think the government rolled out a program of giving girls the sanitary towels, but then at some point, it was not on a regular basis, and we know that menstruation happens every month. So when a girl is given only a packet for 3 months, then it is inadequate. It is not sufficient enough. So I think the government should do something on that, and also the government should come up with a program where they can follow up on these sanitary towels. Are they being given to the right people? Are they being given to the needy girl child? Is the needy girl child the one who is accessing whatever the government is providing for them? Yes.
Very well said. And Joseph, this is such a pertinent issue because literally it has tentacles to the early pregnancies, because there are those who actually engage in sex for pods, you know. Talk about how this is a hindrance and what more can be done.
I think maybe I'll begin at the point of saying that it's encouraging. Actually, in terms of the Basic Education Act, it has only been amended once. And that amendment so far, and that amendment was actually to facilitate a process whereby the girl child could actually get pads. But the challenge that is coming out here is probably to the effector of this particular rule, in that particular case, the government, to be more effective in terms of implementing that particular provision. Like you have indicated, yes, it has a lot of tentacles and has far-reaching effects in terms of actually impairing the girl child getting education, and it's a serious issue. Now, I want also to comment on the issue of inclusivity, and that has really come out. And one of the good things about what is being called the political statement of the Uhuru Kenyatta Declaration is that he is making a commitment and urging the member state countries to commit to address issues of inclusivity, including those issues pertaining to children with disabilities. So that's a wonderful thing. And actually, the reason why even we in the civil society are supporting this particular statement, because we feel it's strong. Because number one, if you actually look at it, the president is actually telling the other global leaders, we have committed ourselves to the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goal number 4. That is one. Number two, education is actually a means of attaining all those other aims. And he actually appreciates the fact that actually COVID has hit us. It has hit us, and it has demands on us, and even on matters pertaining to the budget. So that means that actually the education budgets are at risk. And he also points out that to address issues, to be relevant in the 21st century, we need to produce a holistic child, and education is way up there. The statement is powerful, and I think he will be making that statement today. And that being the case, we support it. But the most crucial thing is the idea that he's addressing matters related to inclusivity. Because we cannot address quality of education if we do not address matters related to equality or lack of equality. And in our country, there are geographical regions that have been disadvantaged for a very long time. The arid areas. there are certain genders that are disadvantaged. Indeed, the conversation we are having brings about a gender issue. Nationally, we have we have attained gender parity in terms of education. But now when you start breaking it down, then you realize some certain regions in this particular country are really having challenges. So issues of inclusivity are crucial. And we are looking forward to the government coming in and addressing these issues, and we're going to hold them to account, because this is a promise that is being made today. We are committing to address those issues of inclusivity.
Okay, now I'm told that Esther is back with us, and even as we hear from the most crucial stakeholders to education, which are or who are the children, Esther, what would you challenge, for example, your county, Migori, to ensure it keeps as priority when it comes to ensuring that each and every child in that county accesses quality education?
First, the government should support these children, their education, especially girls. Girls are passing in difficult situation while in school, like during their menstruation periods. They do pass a lot, some lack pads, so the government should help them by giving them these pads. Secondly, the government should support them by giving them enough books that they can use in school for their studies. The government should also ensure that the children living with disabilities have access to quality education. Thank you.
Okay, and from Carlton, as a boy child and going about life and trying to get the best out of the opportunity you've been given in accessing education, what are the gaps you see, especially in your county?
The gaps which I can see
Carlton.
in our county.
All right, this is to Carlton.
Sorry?
So the question is, in as far as accessing education and the gaps therein, what are you seeing in Mombasa County?
In Mombasa County, children are not able to access quality education because the most is affecting boys is drugs. Most boys are the target by selling these drugs to their owners, so they don't have the time to go to school, and most of the parents are the ones who are contributing to this because they need the money to pay the rent maybe, and also to buy the basic needs for the child. So they tell the child, go out, hustle, come in the house with money so that we can pay for you your school fees, we can pay for you we can pay the rent of the house, and as long as you stay in this house, you must go and work hard. So we should also the government should also try to educate the parents.
Okay, and today we definitely are seeing a summit that is trying to get funding to ensure at least there's money somewhere that gives support to ensure hata kama hakuna pesa nyumbani, a child can be supported in school. How will this be important from where you sit? How will this be important? How important is the funding towards enabling these children go to school?
If the government do this, it will be very important to the family. It will make the work easier for the family to allow their children to go back to school without telling them to go and work hard. And the children will be happy because all children in Kenya have a dream, and the only way to get to their dream is to have quality education.
Very well said. Now, we're going to take a quick break here on Your World. When we come back, I'd like to understand some of the issues that still pertain some of the children when it comes to access to quality education, and also take some of your feedback in as far as what you think the government needs to prioritize in this area. We'll be right back. Umesema ni how long? Okay. From different counties, and this is so crucial because they are the recipients of this education we speak of. And speaking of which, I mean, we are in a pandemic, still reeling in the same, and we know this has had tremendous impact on the education sector. Let me hear from Whitney. How has the pandemic affected you as a child during this, trying to access your education?
From my point of view, COVID-19 has really negatively affected us, especially about the education calendar. I think it was so disappointing. You know, you have to repeat the same class. It was so disappointing, but at least we had a chance to come back to school. I know though the pandemic is still there, but at least we were given a chance. And I also think the pandemic has negatively affected both boys and girls, especially, I'll talk about that defilement for that matter. During the pandemic, we saw a lot of rape cases. You know, we talk mostly about girls, but I think also boys, they're being defiled, but they suffer in silence because in maybe, let me say, how people think these days that I'm a man, you know, you don't have to say certain things. But I think if you're feeling that something wrong is being done to you, you should come out despite of the gender, whether female or male. Coming out to share a problem doesn't mean you're being weak. Yeah.
Very well said. Carlton, I mean, at some point, the children were at home for a full 9 months. What was the impact of this to you?
The pandemic has done a lot. While the children were at home, especially boys, it reached at a point that most of them learned how to use drugs, and that was not good to them. And now that schools are open, most of them are not in school because they are engaged in drugs.
Okay. How about you, Esther? What's the situation in Migori?
Many girls got pregnant, some are not going back, some are not in school. So this has affected many of them. Thank you.
Okay, now Joseph, one thing stands out in all this, and I think perhaps we can hear from Georgina because she's the elder one in the group. From your perspective, how has this impacted negatively on education?
This is countrywide, so a lot of girls got pregnant during that period. And my question is, will they go back to school? Will all of them really go back to school? Will their parents ensure that they go back to school? Is there anyone who will follow up on them and make sure that these girls receive education? So that is my biggest concern with this pandemic.
And those are very pertinent questions because a directive was given that every child should go back to school, pregnant or not. But the question is, will that actually happen? Joseph?
That is the critical question in the room. And the good thing is that we have a policy right now, the back to the children resuming schools, especially after getting those kind of challenges. There is a policy. So what that means is that there is room, there are guidelines. So there is room to actually make that happen. That is the good thing that you can say. So the other element is now just the implementation of that particular policy. Now, adding to that, I want to say something about especially input provided by Carlton and even one of the child participants in the sense of the boy child. The boy child is also affected.
Yes.
And generally speaking, within the education sector, I think one of the gaps where there is a lacuna is that stakeholders have not accumulated a lot of evidence with regards to the boy child as compared to the girl child. That is a big gap. And why that is a big gap is that right now, development projects or interventions follow evidence. And the evidence is skewed in one particular direction. So we have this danger of the boy child being forgotten. And part of the gap is that we have not collected sufficient evidence in terms of the boy child. Each and every day we have a lot of evidence or evidence building up on the girl child. And so it makes it easy for interventions to happen. But there is a crisis and there ought to be balance. So that is part of it. Now, in terms of COVID, just to comment, COVID has really had an impact. And the beauty is that today, that is going to be acknowledged, that actually COVID has had this impact on our education systems. But coming locally, one of the things COVID has actually brought out is the digital divide in our country. Yeah. It has brought it out very, very, very clearly. Like statements attributed to the government the government is candid and actually just says that when the schools closed, less than 10% of learners in rural areas were actually reached. And in urban areas, less than 20%. That is damning. For example, if you're looking at it from the context that IT, technology, is the future. So that means to all of us, there is a lot of work to be done. And part of the commitments is actually to invest in technology. But we have got a long way to go. If you look at the sums in terms of absolute figures, now you'll even be more surprised. But the bottom line is that there is that particular challenge in terms of COVID. But then COVID has also made worse the challenges within the education sector. And that has had a bearing in terms of the provision of quality education. There are issues of inclusion that we need to deal with that were there. There is the element of matters related to the capitation grants. Now, one of the things, the calendars and every other thing, some of the issues that are coming out of it is that capitation grants are not given to schools in good time. That was a challenge and is still a challenge today. And it ought to actually be addressed. Because if you do not give a head teacher capitation in time, if you don't give a principal capitation in time, they're going to push that pressure on the parents. And because of that, we are going to have a situation whereby additional levies will be charged to parents or to children to access that particular education. I had talked about digital divide. There is issues related to ECDE. Now, that's a function that has been devolved. But now, the challenge here is that the national government, the county government, and the council of governors, these entities are not talking. So at the end of the day, ECD is having a lot of challenges. We do not have one unified policy. So you find a situation in counties. Every county is doing its own things with regard to ECD. One would argue out that it's related to their needs. But when you study, you realize that they're just doing things. There is no direction. So one critical thing, the national government, the county government, and the council of governors, they have got to sit together and see what they do about ECD. And you know that is where the children are most. Yeah. We have teacher challenges. Right now we have a capacity gap of around 100,000 teachers. The system can only absorb so much. But then again, we have got around 300,000 teachers out there who have already been trained, but they don't have jobs. This is a crucial issue. Issues of infrastructure, they're dire. COVID has even made this worse. So that we're talking about social distance, the implication of the classrooms required is just enormous. So when you look at some of these challenges, and then you realize that funding that they're talking about today is crucial. Let it come. And after it comes, then players in the civil society, we can try to see what you can do in terms of holding the government to account. Yes.
All right. So remember, the question of the day to you is, because we'd like you to be part of this conversation, is what more needs to be done to ensure all our children have access to quality education. You're still talking to us. That hashtag is new normal. If you can have some of that feedback on the screen. We have Mogeni Isaac who says, an equitable resource allocation. How is someone in Mandera doing the same exam with somebody in Starehe Boys? Very pertinent. Mutena says, inadequate tutors, funds, infrastructures, insecurity, etc. The government has potential to solve if it weeds out corruption. Very well said. Political goodwill. Jonah Wanjohi here says, it is a system not developed to cater for African problems. Interesting perspective there, Jonah. Keep talking to us. That hashtag is new normal. And now that we're talking about the impact of the pandemic on the child, I'd like to know from the children. You were sent back to school after 9 months. Around you, you can see people dying due to this condition, and you're back to school being told to social distance, wear your mask, wash your hands regularly. Whitney, do you feel that you are aptly, prepared to go back to school? Is your well-being being catered for?
Well, actually, I think the pandemic hit hard, and we had to go home for a long period of time. I think maybe some were ready, some were not. But despite the fact, I think it was right for us to go to school because we can't let the disease rule or control us. As long as you just wear the masks and sanitize and keep the social distance, I think we will fine. But maybe if we see our schoolmates, maybe those who are pregnant or maybe those who are emotionally tortured, maybe because of the COVID-19, some maybe lost their parents, I think it affects us, but we can deal with it if we come out and talk about the problems. We can air out our problems so that someone can listen to us. I think we'll be fine.
Very well said. Let me hear from Esther. Is this happening in your school, getting psychosocial support?
Yes, it's happened in our school. Like most of the parents lost their jobs during the corona period. So some of the students get it difficult to come back to school because they don't have the parents to pay for them their school fee. Their parents lost their jobs.
Okay, and how about you, Carlton? What's your experience?
First, I thank our school because teachers are trying to mentor the children, because during the pandemic, during the long holiday, most of them could not access the education online. But when they came to school, the teachers started afresh to make the other children who could not access the online education to catch up with others.
Okay, very well done. And Georgina, as we started off this conversation, Joseph was very clear when defining quality education. It's not only about the reading, passing the exams and doing well in class. You really have to think about the 360, and the well-being of the student is very critical. How can this be catered to better?
From a point of view, I think it's coming up with a holistic curriculum where children are taught values, are taught morals, are taught everything about in the society is included in the curriculum. So it's not all about, infrastructure and all that, but then we're also thinking about how do we bring up children in the right way? How do we educate children these morals? How do we put these morals in them so that when they grow up they know what to do, they know how to behave when certain things come up.
And Joseph, this is interesting and very pertinent because I know in April you had you met a few counties here and there just to ensure that you talk about what's critical for them and the needs therein. What is the commitment you're getting? Where is the political goodwill? Is it there?
In terms of the political goodwill, especially the political goodwill, that is now we're talking about the government. One of the things just relating it to the challenge that we have just talked about, and that is the issue relating to psychosocial support. When we looked at this issue deeply, we realized one of the things that impair in action is that we do not have a policy. In that particular area, we do not have a policy. And though we have been having guidance and counseling departments, we have been operating without a policy. Now, what that means is that there is a limitation in terms of actions that the government can actually do. So what we have done as a Elimu Yetu, we brokered a kind of a deal between the government and the alliance that I've talked about, the Joint Forces Alliance, which at the moment we are having a process whereby together they're working out to bring about the policy, to work around the counseling, the guidance and counseling policy, which is also going to take care of the issue related to psychosocial support in school. So that is part of the things that we are doing. Now, having been part of the process, you will actually notice that the government is genuinely actually touched by this particular issue, especially what has come out with in terms of the psychosocial issues around schools. But what we are doing is that we want to follow up the process, ensure the policy is in place. Then there will be no reason that there is no policy around this to tackle issues about issues affecting our children and even teachers on matters related to psychosocial support. So, but it is a huge problem because I am very sure that soon we are going to start reading articles here and there what is happening in schools. The pressure is too much. When the calendar was actually shrunk, the pressure was on teachers and it was also on the pupils, and it still remains so. So the critical question then is, how do we then make the environment within which this calendar is squeezed to be in such a way that it alleviates the pressure that is coming to the teachers and also that the pupils are experiencing? And that's partly the reason why we keep on saying, give capitation in time. Because if you don't give capitation in time, that only builds pressures for school administration. Like up to 2 days ago, capitations hadn't been given to school. And yet we are opening. And the critical thing about this opening is that all the 15 million children are going to school. That is the kind of pressure the managers have. Control the environment, the pressure is there, but how do we support the school administration and our children to move through this particular hard reality of actually having the curriculum squeezed to be implemented within a very short period? Yes.
All right. And even as we focus back on the importance of the day and why this funding will go a long way in enabling all these solutions we speak of today, earlier in the month, a section of leaders drawn from pastoral communities accused the national government of neglecting the role of improving infrastructure of public schools in the region. Now, the leaders noted that most schools in the region do not have access to infrastructure development funds, which are meant to improve infrastructure of public schools across the country. And our North Rift region reporter Lois Wangoi had more details.
Naibor Amani Primary School in Laikipia County has just received a major facelift and now boasts of new facilities providing decent spacious rooms for learners here. But most schools in this region still lack basic infrastructure, and learners in the pastoral and marginalized communities are having to make do with dilapidated schools. Now, regional leaders want more from the national government.
Na hii pesa ni ya kusaidia kujenga mashule. Na kila moja wetu, wale wako Nairobi na sisi wafugaji, tunalipa hiyo deni.
Hali inaenda ni pahali ambayo tayari watu wanajiweza. Ulizeni serikali, hiyo pesa infrastructure isaidie jamii ile iko nyuma kimasomo.
Education has proved effective among pastoralist communities in North Rift in improving their socio-economic welfare and eradicating retrogressive vices such as cattle rustling, banditry, female genital mutilation, and early marriages.
Tujenge shule, watu waweke bunduki chini, washukue kalamu. We exchange guns for pens.
Mahali tulifika tukasema kumbe dawa ya mwanadamu ni kusoma. Akili yake ifunguke. Alafu roho ya mwanadamu ni kuokoka.
The leaders have expressed optimism that Naibor Amani Primary, which has been built at the border of Turkana, Samburu, Pokot, Kikuyu and Maasai communities, will foster harmonious relations. Lois Wangoi, NTV.
Very pertinent issues raised here and definitely are going to be looked into, or those in the industry, in hope that the monies that will come out of today's summit will actually be able to go and support all these areas that have been pointed at. Now, let's hear from the children. You know, today is like Christmas for those in the education sector, and we really hope that the best comes out of this summit. Whitney, from where you sit, if you were given all this money we're talking about, what would you change in Busia County?
Okay, first of all, infrastructure. Some schools, maybe there are classes, but there are no desks. I'll work. It's because.
I think we seem to be having a challenge with Whitney. We'll get back to you in a moment. Esther, Migori County, if you were given all this money, what would you change for the children?
First, I will build the classes, enough classrooms which can accommodate all the students for their safety learning during their studies. I will ensure that the books are enough and the books are in school, which they can use for their studies and even their revision, and even building the libraries and the laboratories in school. Thank you.
How about you, Carlton?
First, if I was given that money, in Mombasa there are schools, yes, but the educational facilities, and I'll make sure that children can get equal education from, like, Mombasa can get equal education from the children who are in Nairobi.
Yes. Very, very crucial. And Whitney, do we have you back?
Yeah.
Okay, so what would you do with all the monies?
Okay, I'll first of all infrastructure, and before infrastructure, I will also educate the parents to release their children to go to school, whether they have school fees or not, because education is a child's right and education determines the future of the child. So I will create awareness and notify the parents to take their children back to school.
Very, very, very well said. And I hope the parents are listening to this because they are also part of the bigger ecosystem. And for you, Georgina, I mean, all these child advocates, and they see where the need is and they know where the money should go to. How can these advocates work along with the powers that be, so to speak, to ensure this comes to reality?
I believe in peer-to-peer talks. So when you talk to someone else about something, when you talk to your peer about an issue and you share out the issue, then you can come up with a solution. Then I also believe in friendship between the parents, the teachers and the students. So when we have a system where the parents, the teachers and the students work together in harmony, when, for example, if a teacher has a problem, they willingly share it with the parents and the children. And when the child has a problem, they willingly share it with the parents and also the teachers. So when we have such a kind of system in place, then I think we will be able to move to a place.
All right, Joseph, we've had it from the stakeholders,
yes.
the VVIPs. So what key outcomes are we expecting out of today's replenishment summit that would go to meet these needs that have been highlighted?
I think the key outcome should be on the question as to whether we'll be able to meet the target. And that particular target is raising USD 5 billion 5 billion to cover the supporting GPE for a period of about 5 years. Another outcome that we are really hoping for is actually getting commitments from the governments to allocate 20% of their resources to education. Because at the end of the day, local resources are the most sustainable resource in terms of funding education. And also, and also have countries who do not allocate like 20% of their resources to education, do so progressively over the 5 years, commit to do so. And that is the reason why His Excellency the President is there, to actually get that political commitment from countries that they are going to make those kind of allocations to education. Now, in Kenya, one of the things that excites me about this is if you look at the budget for this particular year, 25% of that particular budget has gone towards education. Now, Kenya will be making its statement on commitment, and that statement on commitment says that on average for the next 5 years, the government is going to commit itself to provide an average of 25% of its budget to education. Now, that is exciting. But then again, there is also that particular element that the bulk of the education budget actually covers recurrent expenditure. So a limited amount goes to development. So we need to have some form of funding to come and actually address these particular gaps so that we can be able to address matters of equality and inclusion. But what again I like about this is that as a product, there will be a general commitment from the countries there that whatever funding they are going to use it in an efficient, effective, and transparent manner. That, to me, will be a great outcome of it.
Okay, so even as civil society, how do we ensure that we reach that child who actually needs this? Needs this support, the parents that need this support, because as Carlton says, his dream is to see, whether you're in Mombasa, Mandera, wherever, that you all have the same education. Yes. Now, I look at it this way. Now, if Kenya is going to get its share, which we're hoping it's going to get its share, Kenya already has got a plan. Okay. And the plan is already there. Actually, it is in a draft form. And having listened to the conversation today, actually it addresses all those areas. That's the reason why I'm excited about it. Now, after getting that particular allocation, for the civil society would be the question, how do we then make sure over the next 5 years, the government actually follows that particular plan to be able to address some of these issues, including matters related to equity and inclusion? Because it's one of the things that is really coming up. And one of the 3 areas that is targeted with this particular plan is matters related to equity and inclusion. That's why it's very, very relevant. So for us, the civil society will be, now that the money is here, how are we moving? The tracking of that particular expenditure. Because even with internal resources, 25% of the money is allocated to education. The question as civil society we should be asking ourselves, how much of that money actually reaches the Ministry of Education? That's the critical question. And I think that is what we shall be following up to ask, because between the exchequer and the ministry, something can happen. And at the end of the day, instead of 25, you get 16%, 19% of those allocated. So what are the factors contributing to you getting that less amount? And indeed, one of the things that has been observed during this particular conference is that because of COVID-19, there is a danger of education actually missing out on resources or losing out that which was actually allocated to it. This is actually something that should be looked into. And that's the reason why President Kenyatta is emphasizing the question, yes, we appreciate COVID has hit us, but education is the foundation of addressing all other needs. Let us sustain that funding to education. All right. So even as we bring this conversation to a close, let's hear from our VVIPs, as I am calling them this morning. And I would like to hear your parting shot to these leaders who are attending the GPE Replenishment Summit. They are there on your behalf, and the hope is that they see the need that is out there for all children of the world to access quality education. I'll start off with you, Esther. What is your clarion call to these leaders? Esther, what would you like to tell the leaders? Esther, can you hear me? I think we have lost her. All right. Whitney, what is your clarion call?
Okay, my parting, I would like to part by saying action speaks louder than words. You can plan something, but putting it into action is very hard. So I would like to tell those leaders, please, whatever plans you have, make sure you put them into action. And also like to talk directly to children. If your child listening to me out there, please, if you are facing any violence, any challenge, come out. Your story needs to be told and your story needs to be heard. You're supposed to come out, for I believe nothing for children without children. Thank you.
Very well said. We celebrate you, Whitney. Carlton.
Yes, first I would say the children are the future of tomorrow. With education, our society will be good. And my advice to the government is that they should make sure that all children in Kenya go to school, not only going to school, but getting access to quality education. And the government should also teach the community and the parents to the importance of allowing their children going to school.
Okay, you are a child advocate. How would you want to perhaps, suggest to other children to speak up on their behalf?
My advice to other children in Mombasa and all over Kenya is that they should speak up what they are facing in their community or in their county. All children should come out and share to the government or to their leaders.
Okay. All right. Do we have Esther back on the line? I think we lost Esther at some point, but we appreciate you, Georgina. You're the elder one of the crew. Your parting shot?
So schools should be a safe place, and my cry to the government is that they should ensure that children are happy being in school. That, when we go to school, we are happy, we enjoy being in school. So that is my clarion call to the government. Make school a safe place and a happy place to be. Yes, thank you.
All right. Now, Joseph, I love when you listen to the children. It is very simple and to the point.
Exactly.
All right. So as an adult, as a stakeholder, your parting shot to those that go to represent us?
Live to your commitments. Look at the commitment, what the heads of state are actually saying. Number one, we're going to invest 20% of our resources to education. That's okay. We're going to address issues related to equity and inclusion. That is fine. We're going to focus on improving learning outcomes. That's okay. And when the money comes, we're going to be transparent and accountable over those particular funds. Let them live to that particular commitment. Yes, that's my parting shot.
Okay, Joseph Wasikongo, National Coordinator, Elimu Yetu Coalition. We were also joined by Georgina Yuma, who is the Youth Advocate, Plan International. Also joined by Whitney Blessings, a child advocate from Busia County and attends Pwani University. Esther Velma Cheng, child advocate, joining us from Migori County. Carlton Hamadi, also a child advocate at the SOS Children Village, particularly Mombasa County. He attends SOS Haman Maina Primary School. We really, really appreciate all of you for being part of this conversation and being candid about the realities that you face on the ground, because as they say, vitu kwa ground ni different, but we really appreciate you for being part of this conversation. So remember, this is a pertinent conversation ahead of this high-level summit dubbed the Global Partnership of Education Replenishment Summit that is being held today in the United Kingdom. It is co-hosted by Kenya and the UK. President Uhuru Kenyatta is in the UK to ensure that these monies that we seek or the globe seeks will be put aside, and especially in the face of a pandemic, that each and every child will still be able to access their right to education. Thank you for your time. My name is Gladys Geshanja. Have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday.